Good morning. This is John from the Springs Mennonite Church, and I'm happy to be with you here today. I'm in the second week, the early part of the second week, talking about if you clauses in the Bible. Now, I've already covered a bunch of these things, and today I'm going to share one that's really, really important. But I want to tell you up front, it's really, really hard. So before we get started, you think about, do I want to do something that's really, really important, even if it's really, really hard, or do I want to quit listening? And if you decide you want to quit listening, well, I won't know about it. You can just click me off and maybe come back another day. So I'm going to read to you from Matthew chapter 6, verses 14 and 15. These are Jesus's own words in the very first sermon that he ever gave to people. So you'd think that this was really important, and I believe it is. Jesus says, if you forgive those who sin against you, your heavenly Father will forgive you. If you refuse to forgive others, your Father will not forgive you. Well, let that sink in a minute. If you forgive those who've harmed you, then God will forgive you. If you don't forgive those, God's not going to forgive you. Jesus makes it really tough right here, right in the beginning of his ministry. He wants people to know that this decision to walk with God is not going to be a cakewalk. It's got some pitfalls, and it's got some requirements that will test the abilities of the very, very best of us. And this one is one of those. It talks about forgiveness. Now, I don't know about you, but I really want God to forgive me. I've tried to walk with him for a long, long time, but I have messed up and messed up and messed up. And so if you are at the stage of messing up, okay, don't get discouraged. You're in the same boat as the rest of us. You're not going to not mess up. You're not going to not do things that God isn't proud of. But when that does happen, even if it's intentional, God has said he'll forgive us if we will ask him to. But there's a caveat to that, and one that people don't want to think much about, and many people just absolutely don't want to do. The caveat is God will forgive us as long as we forgive those who have injured us. Now, we have injured God, and we want forgiveness. That's fair. But Jesus is saying here, if someone has offended you, you have to forgive them too. Man, that forces you and me to think about how much they've hurt us. It forces us to think about a hierarchy of hurt. Now, if someone just doesn't say hello back to me, that's not a big deal. But if somebody actively works to make me look bad, so I'll lose my job, and maybe even do lose my job, that's a big hurt. And you and I can rate our hurts from little to big to incredible to no chance I'm ever going to let that happen again. But you see, God looks at our mistakes in really the same way, with one difference. We have small offenses against us. We have bigger offenses and bigger ones. But God only has one class of offense. You know what that class is? Horrible. But that's it in for a minute. When we think we've only done something little against God's ways, we kind of think, well, that's not that big of a deal. But it is a big deal because in God's eyes, sin is sin is sin. There's no big sin, there's no little sin. It's just sin. Now, having said that, don't you think forgiveness from God is a pretty big deal? I mean, how else are we going to get his favor? How else are we going to live a life for eternity in his presence? We can only do it if he gives us forgiveness. And I know some of you who are listening to me have never asked him to forgive you for anything because you don't think you need forgiveness. Well, okay, you can think that. You know, you have the right to think anything you want to think, even if it's wrong. But at the same time, if we want God to forgive us, we have to forgive others. Now, I understand sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's really hard. And sometimes it's dang near impossible. But we still have to do it. Why? Because we have to honor God with our lives. And God's presence is one of forgiveness when someone is sincere. If you're not willing to forgive somebody else, why do you think you're sincerely apologizing to God? Well, I could say a lot more on this, but I probably hammered it as much as I'm going to get away with. The good part here is that God will help you forgive. It won't be overnight necessarily. It won't be easy. But if you're sincere and you're wanting to walk with God, then offer forgiveness to those who have hurt you and let God grow that desire to give forgiveness. Well, thanks for listening. If you have a need or a concern, let us know. We'll do whatever we can as fast as we can to help meet your need. Thanks so much. Till tomorrow, when I'll be back, may the Lord bless you today.